if you listen to this podcast, I think to summarize, he can save you money, make you money, reduce stress for the future. Just for your general listener, how could they potentially benefit from listening to the next hour?
So just making sure that if you want to feel more confident, calm, less anxiety driven, that there's going to be some actionable tips here for you.
How can you start saving money or saving more money?
We had a client once where we went through the expenditure with, never looked at it, just got hung up on it. And they said that he signed a basic agreement which he believed was for a test session, and they ended up setting him up on a car finance. So you've got a 50-30-20 rule. 50% of your net income goes on your essential expenditure, 30% goes on spending, living life, and then 20% goes on savings. Most people associate cash with being safe. The biggest thing that you should be looking at when you're investing, as I mentioned earlier, is to get a return above inflation.
Today, another very special guest, a good friend of mine, someone I've been friends with my whole life, in fact, the man that sat next to me, Scott Millar. He's someone that, if you listen to this podcast, I think to summarize, he can save you money, make you money, reduce stress for the future. And with that in mind, you'd probably think he's a bit of a superhero and you want to listen. But if I mention the words financial advisor, you probably already want to click off the podcast. But since you set up your business in the financial advisory space, you've been very disruptive and you're doing very well for yourself. So, Scott, thanks for joining me, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, starting with that bit, the disrupting the financial advisory industry, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. How have you gone about that? What are you doing? How are you bringing the youth to the industry?
Yeah. So we set up Finova Money just over a year ago now. Before that, we were working at a traditional financial planning space firm. Again, very good firm. But before that, a very traditional, what you would think of as the old school insurance man that used to sell your mum and dad insurance premiums every month and so forth. So we did our learning at a company called First Wealth before. We then got tired of the traditional model. The traditional model is basically always set up for traditionally the older generation, people with a load of assets, and doesn't really cater for those who are setting up businesses, who still we can add a load of value to, who maybe are high earning professionals, or really just for our own generation. So we noticed that we were attracting those sorts of clients, but the firm weren't allowing us to work with them because they didn't meet the stereotypical asset amount that we needed to advise on and so forth. So we decided that there must be a better way to serve these people. And in doing so, we basically set up now, we're fully subscription based, ability to predominantly, most of our clients are under the age of 40, most under 35. So really trying to cater for the next generation of clients, and also with one eye on the future that we are only going to aim to bring on new unqualified advisors to train them up and give them a start.
Nice. And so before we touch on that further, just for people listening or watching, if they are going to listen to the next 45 minutes, hour, however long this podcast, someone that's perhaps not asset rich yet, not starting a business, just for your general listener at home, how could they potentially benefit from listening to the next hour?
So what the aim of this is going to be is all around, okay, what are the fundamental foundational aspects of getting financially organised? You actually don't need necessarily us, okay, if you can get the foundations right. We want to make sure that people are not listening to finfluencers, is what I would call them. Finfluencers, people that only want to get paid by get rich quick schemes, and I can confirm that the only people that get rich off those get rich quick schemes are the people that are selling them. Yeah. So just making sure that if you want to feel more confident, more calm, less anxiety driven, that there's going to be some actionable tips here for you.
Nice. And I think actually that is something we'll touch on at some point, is the whole get rich quick schemes. It ties into what I'm promoting on this channel in terms of the playing slightly the longer game. You did it, I did it. You know, it's taken me 5 years to build up this building company, which is a quote unquote traditional business, to now being a decent business. Obviously, you played the long game of however long you were still doing exams for 7 years or something in your industry to get the experience and the knowledge skill set to be able to obviously set up on your own. Whereas there's a lot of people, they're hungry, they want that success, they want that good money, but they might even be willing to play the long game, but it's just what's out there on the internet to them isn't as enough people like us that promote playing that long game. Instead, it's 10K a month within 6 months, 20K a month within 6 months, 20K a month, and you don't even have to work, all of this sort of stuff. And it's just, for most part, it's unrealistic. Or by the time that they're talking about it and selling it, it's too late. There's too many people. They got in very early, and now, they're trying to sell it because it's kind of saturated. Yeah. So that's an important thing. And you must see that a lot, people jumping into whatever.
Yeah, and
new
shiny opportunities, staying away from fads, working it. We try and encourage people to, as you say, for most people, it's getting the basics right, is understanding what they've currently got, where they're trying to get to, and then what are the actionable things they can actually do. These get-rich-quick schemes, like I say, don't actually work for the majority of people. They only work for the people that are selling it. I haven't come across one yet, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, that actually works, whether it be FX, e-commerce. You could probably go on and name a couple of them. I haven't seen any that truly work for the majority of everyday people that actually give the outcomes that they promise, where, like you say, they don't actually have to spend the time doing it. Spend 1 hour a day at your laptop and go and live in Dubai for the rest of your life. This stuff doesn't happen.
And the reason you're so well placed as well for obviously people watching this is doing what you do. You get full access to see people's financial situation and where they've made their money and how the money's come in and how long they've been making that money and so on and so forth. It's not what they're telling you on the outset. So you actually get to see what, essentially, mainly you do work for wealthy people, rich people, like saying, especially if they're under the age of 35, so they've done it at a young age. So you kind of know exactly what works and what doesn't.
We still work with some older clients who, again, probably not your traditional, and equally we've taken on a lot of younger business owners who are just starting out, who probably, to give people some context, typically in financial planning or financial advice, wealth management, whatever they want to call us, is you needed, the advisor gets paid via the amount of money you invest with them, and they'll charge a percentage for that. So 3% up front, 1% up front, and then 1% ongoing to manage that money. So for context, if you invest 500,000, 15,000 goes off first of all, and then 15,000, and then I've got my maths wrong then. Right. So 500,000 = 5,000 a year, right? So 5,000 a year just to run it. Now, traditional IFA, my problem with that is that if we're trying to help younger people that don't necessarily have that level of wealth at the moment, but are building a business and most of their wealth is tied up in their business, there's certain pitfalls and things that they may fall foul of, that if they don't have advice, that they won't be as successful, they won't have made benefits or wealth where they could have done if they're just left to their own devices. Now, the problem that I have with the percentage model is that at the end of the process you're going through that advisor is going to recommend that you invest with them, right? Now, you and I both know, because you've done this yourself, that actually investing is arguably one of the more simple parts of what we do. Actually, a lot of younger people, with the availability of information now, I think a lot more younger people are a lot smarter than people give them the credit for, that they can find out how to invest money in a sustainable, suitable way. And actually, they need us for the proper planning around tax planning, income strategy, how to structure businesses, what to do with cash management in the business and so forth. And actually, the investment part just forms one part of it. And therefore, working with us, where we work off a fixed fee subscription basis, that the advice that you're getting is impartial. I'm not telling you have to invest money with us. We have some principles of investing, which we'll probably talk about. But actually, if you want to do this yourself, you go and do that, but let's plan around here. Whereas the other side is, well, actually, there's a conflict because I know that you're going to tell me to invest with you because that's the only way I get paid.
Yeah. And just to clarify, it's because they have investment products to sell you, which they obviously earn a commission out of. And basically, when you do that, or when they move your money around, is when they get paid. Yeah. Whereas for you, you're basically like an actual consultant.
Yeah. Exactly.
Unbiased side of things. So, all right. So for starting at the most simple stage for listeners, watchers, I don't actually have this on Spotify, Apple Music. Yeah, it's just YouTube. So hopefully everyone's watching. How, if you're working your 9 to 5, right? How can you start saving money or saving more money per month to be able to, obviously that's the step one, right? You need to be able to save money to be able to invest, to be able to quit your job, and so on and so forth. So how can you start saving money on a monthly basis?
No, good question. So the first part really is all around as maybe as dull as it sounds, but this is the fundamental part of anything that you see is people spend more than they earn, right? So that's the first point. So you need to get clear on basically your budget. I prefer the phrase spending plan because spending plan sounds less restrictive, right? But you need to get clear on what's coming in versus what's going out. So the best way that I think about doing that is take your pay slip from work, all right? You'll see the net pay, so take that figure because that is net of tax, national insurance, student loans, pension contributions from if you're employed. So take that figure and then look at your bank account, okay, and look at what you're spending each month. Now, there's loads of good tools now that can tell you and compartmentalize, okay, where you're spending, what you're spending it on. But the easiest way I think of doing this is to list out all of your expenses and list them into debt management, right? So debt management being if you own a property and you're paying a mortgage, if you have some personal loans that you're repaying potentially. The second part is look at, okay, separating out into bills. So what's the non-negotiables, the essentials that if something were to happen, you have to still pay because they're contract-based. Your phone maybe, gas, electricity, rent, whatever that may be. And then the third column you look at is then, okay, savings. That might be empty for some people at the moment. It might not be. And just note down what those are. So split your expenditure into those sort of 3 sections, all right? And then what you'll be able to see is with the money that you get in, okay, how much of that is allocated to debt, how much of that is allocated to bills, and how much is allocated to spending, so saving, all right? And this is the most important part, I think, is to have 2 bank accounts, right? So everyone will probably have one because they get paid into a bank account. And the second one they may need to set up. The ones I personally think are great for this because it looks even more in depth about where you're spending is using a challenger bank. So use Monzo, Starling, Revolut, something like that. Keep your main bank account, keep all of the money that you've allocated out to debt repayment and bills, and then move the remainder over to your new bank account, all right, which is therefore you're spending money or saving money. That way you've got a clear distinction between what you can have the free money for, you're spending money, versus, okay, what actually needs to come out.
But then how do you, okay, so that's good. You've got clear on sort of the non-negotiables. Hopefully you can review the bills, things like your Netflix, that sort of stuff. There's probably some cutbacks for most people. It's actually impressive once you take the time to go through your bank statements, both in business and in personal. Even in business, sometimes it's even worse because when you're running a business, you kind of feel like the money's a little bit different. Like 20 quid a month's kind of nothing in a business, or most businesses, you know. And before you know it, you can have a shitload of direct debits going out for nonsense that if you actually go through.
Yeah, agreed. And
you don't do this normally, you can go 6 months without looking at your statements. I know I was guilty of it. Now I make sure to go through more regularly and just cut things out, cut things out. I was paying like, my phone bill was meant to be, my second phone was like £20 a month, SIM only, like my work phone. I remember then it was £45 a month I'd been paying for a year, and because it had been a year, they said, oh, tough, we can't do anything. So I just wasted 250 quid to Vodafone. It's
you
a
know
joke,
though, this happens, right? I'll give you a real life example. It's a little bit warped because of who this person is, right? But we do this for every client that we work with on the initial phase, right? Which is how much are you actually spending? Where is that being allocated? Because you're exactly right. You probably should do a spring clean of your expenditure once a quarter just to check that things are happening. And I'm not saying here, look at it and be super restrictive, but look at the things and actually be harsh on, okay, what am I using and what am I not using? Yeah. We had a client once who we went through the expenditure with because they, again, never looked at it, just got hung up on it. And we were like, well, what's this payment here to BMW? He was like, I don't know. I was like, well, you must do something. He was like, well, I said, it was obviously for a car. So we looked at the finance, we looked at it, and it was for a car. But what had happened was he'd gone into BMW and he'd never even had the car, but they saw that he was a young guy doing well. And they said that he signed a basic agreement, which he believed was for basically a test session, and they ended up setting him up on a car finance.
No way.
Yeah, and he'd never noticed because he was earning very well, and he'd just never done a spring clean. Yeah. And I know that's a very warped example, but it's still relative to that person at that time. Yeah. So even on that point, some sleazy car salesman signed him up to a bunch of quid a month.
It's so bad, but that's why it's important to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so now you've got your money into the other account, but you want a different, whatever the word is, between, we don't judge words here, I'm no good with my words, so between your savings and your spending, you don't want that in the same pot, surely. How do you split that then?
Yeah, so what you would want to do initially, first of all, is you'd want to look at, there's some other rules as well, right? So you've got a 50-30-20 rule potentially as well, if you want to look at it, if you want to break it down even further. So 50% of your net income goes on your essential expenditure.
Yeah.
30% goes on spending, living life, and then 20% goes on savings. You need to, essentially the best way to save, invest, whatever it is to automate at the start of the month, right? So potentially when we take it one step back to those two bank accounts, on your main bank account, allocate out from that proportion what you want to put into savings. So whether that be £200 a month, £100 a month, £50 a month, £400 a month, whatever is relative for you, and get that to come out of this bank account, and then move the spending money over into the second bank account. But typically you can look at, I would say budget to zero. So what I mean by that is don't leave any pound unturned. If you know what's coming in, make sure you've allocated it all out. And even by allocating it all out, I mean spend it as well. Because if you're doing that, it means you should have taken the fundamental part of planning out what's your debt repayments, what's your bills, what's your savings, and then what's your spending.
And so with with the 50-30-20 rule, then how do you look at, or when's the right time to start investing? So savings, the first part.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I still think even once you get to the stage of wanting to invest, it's important to save.
Yeah.
How do you then decide when you're ready to start investing? Because there's no point investing. Well, I don't know. What's your opinion? In my opinion, there's no point investing until you've got like 10k to your name, sort of thing. But yeah, what's your thoughts on that? And how do you know when's the right time to start?
Yeah, no, good question. There's it's important to probably distinguish between what is saving and what is investing. Saving is essentially building cash, right? Mm. So cash to sit in the bank, which is there to cover you for a specific purpose, which is either an emergency fund, that if you lose your job, you have a period of time where you can still cover all of those essential expenditures.
What's the time frame you want for that?
So typically what you want for an emergency fund, we say, is 3 to 6 months as a minimum. I probably wouldn't get so hung up on that specific figure. To your point, maybe set a target of what you think that is going to be, but a rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months of your basic expenditure. So that is your mortgage, that's your rent, that's your bills. Mm-hmm. So anything that is contracted and you can't get out of. Mm-hmm. Investing is accumulating assets, right? So when we say assets, we mean property, we mean stocks and shares, companies of the world, potentially bonds, okay, which we'll touch on. Anything crypto, if we're going to talk about potential assets, all right? And that is what investing is. Anything that's going to produce a level of return above inflation, all right? Mm-hmm. Now, inflation is just the cost of things getting more expensive over time. We've probably all felt that over the last year or so, all right? So it's just important to distinguish between what saving is and what investing is. And in answer to your question about when it becomes a good time, once you've got that emergency fund, or if have got any big one-off expenditures in the next 12 months, so whether that is you're maybe looking to buy a house, maybe it's a second property, maybe you've got a wedding you're saving for, that needs to be sat in cash as well. But once you've covered that, that's when we should start to look at investing. And
so if you're investing, what's the rule of thumb around how long should you not need to touch that money? So yes, you've got your emergency fund, but life is life, and sometimes you might need access to the rest of your cash. So how long should you be willing to part ways with your money if you're going to invest?
If you're going to invest, you'd probably say, as a rule of thumb, a minimum needs to be 5 years, but ideally the goal is to never get rid of this stuff. When I say never get rid of it, I mean never deplete it to zero. Mm-hmm. All right. Of course, at some point in the future, if you're going to give up work, if you're going to stop and do something else, you're going to need to draw on it. But the goal is that really you should probably never want to deplete them in assets entirely. But as a minimum, you should be trying to look at tying it away for 5 years. Have that view on it, which is a relatively short amount of time.
But to people that this is maybe a new concept, why do you not want to, like, surely if I'm now in my 20s and you're telling me I can't go on that extra holiday year, I can't go on that night out, you're telling me to not buy champagne at the club, to put into an investment that you say, yes, it's going up, but then to never take it back all out, what's the point?
Never take it back all out. And what I mean by that is that the goal of it is obviously to provide you a lifestyle in the future, right? What I mean is if you're going to run out of money, right, it doesn't matter. If you're going to run out of money, it doesn't really matter what you're doing now, right? Because you're not going to be able to fund it in the future, right? So we just want to make sure that the amount we're drawing out is less than what we're getting on that return on that money, right? So in answer to your question, what am I saying to people that are potentially telling them not to go on that holiday, not to do this? This is why you allocate this stuff out, right? It's why we talk about budgeting, why we talk about planning, building a spending plan, right? Because you need to be forward thinking with your budgeting. So actually, I do want to go on that holiday. What we're sitting here saying is, I don't think you should just save and never live your life. It's plan for today, all right, but tomorrow probably is going to come, all right, so enjoy it, but we need to have one eye on the future, because you don't want to be the person that has to potentially work longer. You don't necessarily want to be the person that doesn't maybe get a house if that's what you want to do. So it's just being intentional with why you're saving, but also intentional with your spending as well.
So with like the first steps to investing or protecting your future, whether it is investing, what do you usually suggest? How do people first get involved? Because I think a lot of people do hit that. I see it, I'm sure you see it, where people got to that age, I don't know, maybe 21, 22, depending, where they're like, oh, I've heard of this investing thing. I've done the compound calculator, and they get started on something and it doesn't go to plan within the first few months, or they lose money, or it drops, or they invest in something that's a scam. And then actually you realise, out of the people that did first start, already a few years later it's got down to a much smaller group of people that have taken it seriously and are still investing and actually building assets. So, and I think probably that's because they didn't have the knowledge on how to go about investing or what to invest in. So what's the first steps for people to not go in, get burnt, and then be disheartened and think, fuck this, I ain't doing this anymore?
Yeah, I think it's understanding around what risk is. So most people associate cash with being, or money in the bank, right, with being safe, right? The biggest thing that you should be looking at when you're investing, as I mentioned earlier, is to get a return above inflation, all right? Inflation is just this, what we would classify as a silent embezzler of money, right? You don't see it, you have no idea it's there, but what you'll see over time is that the value of your money reduces significantly. So cash does have a risk. Cash has inflation risk, because if inflation is 3% and the return on your money is 1% on cash, you're losing 2% every year, right? So it's not sustaining its value. The goal of investing is to get a return above inflation. Now, to answer your question, understanding risk is important. So what most people do when they set up, because they watch Wolf of Wall Street and they decide that buying penny stocks or stocks is the right way to go, it's not the right way to go, right? It's super risky to buy one stock in one company, right? We always talk about this concept, and people have probably heard of it: buy the haystack, don't buy the needle in the haystack, right? So what you should be looking at first when you're deciding to invest is actually breaking it down into layers, right? The first thing you need to look at is your tax wrapper. What is the platform that's going to sit your investments, right? Now, this is important because you don't want to start investing and having to pay tax, right? So really what you should be looking at as a starting point is a stocks and shares ISA, right? A stocks and shares ISA is £20,000 a year max contribution that you can put into it. You can draw money out of it whenever you need to. Again, going back to the point, the right behaviour is to leave it in for as long as possible. But to your point, if you need it, that's what happens with life. All income from it and all capital gains from it, from any returns you get on investments, are completely tax-free. All right, so it's a great way to shelter returns, and equally for people starting out, the likelihood of them saving more than £20,000 a year is low. So that's the first port of call. And
where can you set that up?
So there's various different platform providers. So some of the main ones that you should be looking at, and especially when you're thinking about a platform, one of the things that you want to be wary of is you want to make sure costs are low, because lower the cost, the more money back in your pocket. And you really want to be looking at people like Vanguard, Hargreaves Lansdown, Fidelity. So those are probably the three main ones we would suggest to look at initially. Once you have got the tax wrapper right, you then look at what sits underneath. So that's the investment part. Now, there's essentially two ways to invest, right? If we're not talking about stock picking, because stock picking doesn't work, right? Or there's very few people on this planet that can do stock picking successfully, and nobody knows who they are at the moment either, right? So what you need to be thinking about...
To add on that, like literally even that's the same words that come out of the likes of Jordan Belfort's mouth and people like that who still say you won't be near enough. You will not beat the traditional index fund.
Exactly, and that's where we're going with this, right? Is if you're an everyday person that has a normal job, you want to go on holiday with your friends, you want to go out, you don't want to have to sit behind a computer screen every day. There's two ways to manage money. Actively managed money, which is someone who believes, based on information available to them, they're better placed to tell you where your money should be invested, be that geographically, so where in the world you should be investing, or sectors, or so, for example, whether that be banking, whether that be tech, and all of those sort of aspects. And then on the other side of that, you've got passive investing, which is essentially buying every company within a stock market and leaving it. So for a real life example, in the UK, the biggest market is the FTSE 100. So you'd buy every single company within the FTSE 100. And then in America, it's the S&P 500. So you'd buy the top 500 companies in America. What the evidence shows you is that active managers add absolutely no value over passive investing in the long term. There's a stat that over 20 years, 95% of active managers underperform the market. So not only do you have to find that 1 in 20, right, you have to rely on us to pick that 1 in 20, which is impossible for us to do anyway. So everything should be geared towards passive investing. So again, the main providers of passive investing are Vanguard, is the best way to look at it. And if you're going to look at Vanguard, the best ones to look at potentially are the life strategy funds. So focus on tax wrapper, and then underneath needs to be the investments, which is low cost passive. The reason that you suggest buying a market is that it doesn't matter if one company fails, because you've got, for example, in America, 499 other companies, and another company will come on to pick up that 500 spot. So rather than getting burnt, to your point, where you put 10 grand into one stock and the stock falls 50%, okay, although it's a paper loss, the chance of that recovery now needs to come back double, right? So what we're saying is just buy every company, leave it, invest regularly, and let the market do its thing.
Yeah. And so then, okay, cool. So you'd say that's that level. Now let's say you want the next level of appetite, shall I say, rather than risk. You've got a little bit more appetite. So let's say index funds around, so you're someone that's a little bit more interested, shall I say, in research. You have a bit more of an opinion. You might be someone that you've done a lot of research around AI. You've done a lot of research around where the health industry is going, for example. And actually you look at the 500 companies and where they're allocated, and you look at them and you think, I don't morally agree with them. I don't think they're the future, so on and so forth, right? So you look at niches.
Yep.
Is that the next step? How much more of a risk are you taking on if I just now, still an index fund, but I did an AI index fund and I did a tech healthcare index fund?
Yeah. So the more we'll use the word niche down, the more you niche down into a certain sector, that increases the risk because your concentration risk is higher, right? So you're more concentrated in one specific sector, therefore you're more leveraged in it, and therefore if something happens to it, the returns are amplified up, but the downside is obviously amplified up. Interestingly, we do a lot of work on behavioural finance, and I can confirm the pain of £100 loss versus the gain of £100 gain is far outweighs. Yeah. So people need to be mindful of how comfortable they are with risk as well. The rule that we always have, if people do want to do that, is the rule of 90-10. So 90% of your investment should be index trackers, things that have always worked, great companies of the world. And if you want to have a play around, then it should be a sort of satellite approach where 10% sits outside of that. Okay. And if you've done the research, you're comfortable with it, then that's what we would.
That was going to be one of my next questions. And does that 90-10 apply to the wider, and we will come on to these other things, but in the wider, if you now, let's say you've stepped out of just the index fund, you've now got a portfolio of investing, or you're trying to get there, does that rule still apply? Because I was going to say that, especially when you're in your early 20s, or if you're someone like me or some of my friends, you don't want to just say, oh, I'm invested in this index fund. It's boring. It is boring, and sometimes that's the right answer, but it is still boring. You want the excitement. You want the thrill. You want, okay, we lost, but then we made a good amount of money, So you want to feel like you got the right stock choice and stuff. But at the same time, from your point of view, you have to stay protected. So let's talk in the wider investment portfolio. Would that rule apply? 90-10, would you say, if you're in like your early 20s, so you can have that 10% of crypto or individual stock picks or whatever other investment opportunities might come across?
I would still follow the rule. I think my honest opinion, I know that you and I probably talk about this a lot, is that investing should be boring. It's not sexy. Shouldn't be sexy.
Yeah.
Right. And I think if you've got appetite for it, follow that rule. Right. So 10% into whatever you think is going to work now, the flavour of the month, but 90% core. For most people, maybe listening, that is going to be enough for you to do it. Right. Underneath the index stuff, right, there is different ways. So the two ways to underneath a fund is you've got equity, so the great companies of the world, so the people that you already have, so Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, those big companies, Nvidia, so forth. Then you've got bonds underneath. So bonds are government debt, corporate debt. So these are slightly better than cash, but they're still supposed to act as a counter to equity. So when equities go up, defensive assets are supposed to go down. All right, so it gives you a less volatility. It doesn't give you as much on the upside, but on the flip side, when equities fall, defensive assets go up and give you a much nicer exposure throughout, right? So if you're someone that's not totally 100% risk appetite, right, you need to look at that sort of structure as well. Because the reason I say that is that index funds are 100% equity. So in terms of the risk scale, right, they would be classified as top-end risk, right, because we're investing just in companies. But if you understand how markets have worked historically, you know that the only way to form a solid return, okay, is to invest in the great companies of the world. So although it doesn't sound sexy, it's the best way to invest in it, and sit on your hands and do nothing is the thing that's going to give you the best return.
And if you can live long enough like Warren Buffett,
Correct.
It's clearly the compound
and he's pro,
interest.
Right? He's pro.
Yeah, he is. It's one of the greatest ways to create wealth, right? It's just time. So, do you think everyone should be investing?
Do I think everyone should be investing? Yes. The reason I say that, to add context to that, is that emergency fund is important. All right. To my point earlier around inflation reducing the value of your cash if you're just sitting in cash, investing is the only way to give you a sustainable lifestyle in the future as well, and to give you a return above cash. And the thing that's so great about investing now, and one of the things that we're quite pro talking about and why we're trying to do something different in this industry, is there's always felt like there's been this mystique around the sort of the wealth management space. Men in braces and suits and ties, brown desks and so forth, like mahogany desks. Nowadays, because of the availability of the work that people have done at Vanguard, rest in peace Jack Bogle, right, and all of those sorts of people, access to investing is so close now. You can start investing with £50 a month. And I would argue that once you've got your, and I appreciate the cost of living and things like that would happen, but once you've got a handle on what you're spending, what's coming in, I would guarantee that most people could find £50 towards it. And you know this, right? You mentioned it earlier, compound interest. Even by doing that and incrementally increasing that savings rate every year, you'll start to see a massive impact on that.
And it's even the mindset. If this is the next level conversation for another day, but if you believe in, I don't know, law of attraction or some of the laws of the universe, other laws of the universe, then once your mind shifts to that mindset, you're in the habit, you actually see money can make money for no reason. Obviously, yes, you put it in, but you essentially, when you first see like, what the hell, I just put this in and now I've got more, like one way or another, and you're in the habit of doing it monthly, naturally you're drawn to like, how could that £50, how could I get £100 in there every month? Is there anything else I could save? If I did a few extra hours at work, if I worked a Saturday, whatever it might be, even if I did one Saturday a month and earned an extra £100 that I put in, what would that look like in 5 years? And just shifts people's mindset. So that's why I think, similar to like in Atomic Habits, if you've read that book, just that getting started and then that little 1% better, 1% better, 1% better, compound again.
And I think that's the misconception, is that I think people think that you need to have a lot of money to start, and you don't, because of the people that have been able to make it so accessible for people to start. Like I say, Vanguard, Hargreaves Lansdown, Fidelity, these big firms, you could open an account now within 5 minutes. As long as you've done the research, and like we're talking about today, done the research on, okay, well, how does investing actually work? I don't really want to have to look at this every day, so okay, maybe index investing is the best thing for me. You can set all of that up within 5 to 10 minutes. And then it's automating the savings, going back to that budgeting plan that we mentioned at the start, and then just make sure that you're constantly reviewing it, not reviewing your investments, but reviewing what's coming in versus what's going out. Can I slightly incrementally increase it? And equally, don't think that you have to jump from £50 to £100, right? Because that's a 100% increase in your savings, right? It could be 50 to 60, 50 to 75, and just slowly doing it every year, because that will make a massive difference as well.
So let's talk, like I said, on this channel, I want to talk a bit about traditional businesses with the modern spin. It's what I've done. I've done it through the marketing, the branding, the online presence. We're looking at implementing AI. I know you've done that already within your business. Let's divert to that topic of conversation. So I know that there's very, very few now financial advisors under the age of whatever in the UK. Talk to us about that, how you brought this modern spin to the industry, how you've been quite disruptive with your methods of marketing and so on. Talk to us about that.
So I think there's a shocking stat that there's only 250 advisors under 25 in the UK, and I think once you get between 25 and 30, it might be 1,000, and I think there's about 8,000. And there's a really shocking stat that I think 70% of advisors are going to retire in the next 5 years.
Wow.
Which, for someone like us who's set up, is a huge opportunity in one, but two, it also makes this very clear advice gap too. We are in a very privileged profession where I think we're a more privileged profession than accountants and solicitors, right? People choose to work with us. I'm sure you love going to have a conversation with your accountant. I'm being very judgmental with your accountant. I don't know, right? Or if you have to go and see a lawyer, it's because something has to be done. Usually not something that you really want to be doing.
Yeah.
People choose to work with us because they go, actually, we want to trust someone who's going to guide us through, okay, market cycles, through, okay, how do we actually plan for our future and bring some of this to life? And so they choose to work with us, right? So I think what the first step is actually with that advice gap is making it sure that people are aware this is a profession that people can go into. If you were to go back to school, right, like when you and I were at school, I fell into financial planning, right? Yeah. Nobody chooses to be a financial planner, right? We want to try and make that difference to go, actually, that's someone that, okay, I could see myself doing that. And to your point, this is sort of like high level on this. We're looking at doing marketing, we're looking at doing more personal branding stuff. We're going to give free resources away. Want to just completely blow this whole mystique of, okay, it's quite elusive, you want to have a conversation, you need to pay us to do it. I don't really care. Like, I'm going to give people the information and they're going to see that actually either they can do this themselves, which is great, then we've benefited them, or actually they go, I don't have the time to do this, or I don't want to do this, and then they're going to work with us.
Or the third tier to that, which is you've helped them over a period of 5 years actually get to now a good financial position or improve their business, whatever it might be. So now they do have the funds available. They know it works. They know your methods work. So they've got absolutely 100% trust in you. And now, because they're at the next level, they come straight to you. It's sort of the same methodology that Alex Hormozi uses for... He wants to get you to I think it's 1 million. He says, I'm going to give you all the tools you need to get to £1 million turnover or profit business. You will then know that these tactics work. I'm then looking to work with business owners from 1 million to get you to 5 million or whatever it might be. And it's such actually, again, it's not short-sighted. It's playing the slightly long game, but actually it's the most powerful technique there probably is.
Agreed. And people aren't going to go to the people that they haven't seen, right? So if you're going to think, well, actually, it's much easier to work with someone when you feel like you've known them because they've given this stuff to you and they're showing you value and stuff. And so, well, actually, I saw Scott, or I saw Joe talk about this stuff. I'm going to go and work with them because they've already shown me that what they do.
Exactly. Like, let's see, how optimistic can I be with this? It's my new YouTube channel. Let's say 100 people watch this, yeah? There we are. Hopefully we hit 100 views. 1,000. 10,000. No, however many people watch this, if it's an hour-long conversation, you've just basically had a conversation with 100 people. Like, do you know what I mean? The leverage is ridiculous by doing things like these podcasts, social media posts. We always say that if you get 1,000 views on a social media post, or even 500, sometimes we get 500 like on our podcast, and you think, it's not done that great. Imagine speaking to a room of 500
100%.
people or going for a coffee with 500 people. Obviously, short form doesn't have the same impact, but long form, with people listening from start to finish, it's essentially like we've had a conversation for an hour with them. So then the trust just builds and builds and builds over time. Okay, so talk about your business, because it's not just you. There's a few of you. You're all quite similar.
Yeah.
Just give us a rundown on some of the things you've implemented to... You've touched on subscription, but obviously you're doing other things with AI and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no. So it's me and my two business partners, Rob and Rob. Makes it nice and simple and straightforward. So we all worked together at the last firm. We all decided that we've seen this gap where we're wanting to help younger business owners, younger professionals, and still traditional people, but seeing that sort of space. We do a lot of work with influencers as well, which again have been probably traditionally underserved because for two reasons. One, the older advisors don't understand them and they don't understand that business model. And two, from a client's perspective, a potential client's perspective, they don't really want to work with their dad's advisor or their mum's advisor, right? They want to say, actually, I want to work with someone that gets where we're going, what the sort of ideas are. So we've decided to set up the business model on that way. And that led to subscription based, because we all deal with subscriptions now. Okay. And it can be personalized towards that client's specific situation. It's not just one size fits all with a percentage of assets fee. It's like, what do you need from us? What's the value we're going to add? And therefore that's the fee for it.
Mm-hmm. What's the starting price?
It's £100 a month.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
When people think of, you hear the financial advisor, like I said at the start, most people would need to already turn their video off. But actually, to know that you can get this advice from £100 a month, I know that's your starting price, but actually, that's not a lot at all.
No, and it's just, and I think about, okay, I give you an example. We helped someone today where never taken advice before. We're a business owner. Slightly older, actually, probably, I say slightly older in terms of what we're talking about, so 40, so really not that old, right? Yeah. Business owner, even just cash management side of stuff, making sure they're making their pension contributions, making sure that they're adequately protected, making sure they're getting an interest on it. From the fee that we charge them for it, the return on that's fivefold. And it's just from that one conversation or two conversations from sitting with, planning out what they want to do. And like you say, that return on investment compounded over the next 10 years when they're trying to get themselves in a position where maybe they want to exit their business and stuff like this. That's going to exponentially help them from there. So, yeah.
The thing is, something to remember is, I've always said this to you as well, is you're getting an insight to all of these super successful businesses. So actually, although yes, you're quote unquote financial advisor, you're kind of like a business consultant at the same way. You still have a good eye on certain moves or levers they can pull. Kind of reminds me like of The Founder, you know, the film, the McDonald's one, where the accountant comes in and he comes up with the idea of like, you're not in the burger business, you're in the real estate business. Like, same time you're dealing with people with 7, 8, 9 figure companies and knowing exactly where their money comes from, what works, what doesn't work, getting to meet with these guys, spend a lot of time, learn from them. So you can add so much value.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the things we did when we set up, right, was you and I are part of the same like business group, right? Founders, in sample, we're members of other business groups. And the reason that we wanted to join that is that you want to learn alongside our clients, like you rightly say, is that the financial planning space and the finance space does not do business as much as we deal with. We don't do business great, right? And actually, there's things that we can learn from other professions, industries, that we can then implement to enhance the client experience for us. And everything that we do now, and should always be the way with the finance space, but it hasn't always been the way, is what we're going to improve the client experience for our clients? Are our clients going to get more value from what we're trying to do? If they're not, you cut it. If they are, then we'll try to move it. And the best way to figure out whether they are valuing it is to ask them. Yeah. Right. So it's like, okay, well, we think this is a good idea. We're going to implement it. We have a client advisory board. So our client advisory board is made up of 6 clients of ours. Okay. And every time we make a decision, we run it past them to say,
that's a great idea.
Say, what do you think?
That's a great idea. Yeah. And how did you go about? Is there any structure to that, or is it just simply you've asked a few clients for their?
No. We thought about it in the sense that we wanted, where we've got 3 tiers, and if anyone wants to go to our website, they can see this.
That's a brilliant idea, you know. Right. That's actually a real good idea for all businesses.
So we looked at, okay, the typical demographic of our clients, but we wanted to get a range of demographics. So we've got a young professional on there. We've got 2 young business owners who are on there from different fields. One from property, one is an influencer, and then we've got a retiree couple, and then a professional who's looking to exit at some point in the future. So it's trying to give an array of circumstances, so that, okay, well, we think it might work, but actually it might not work for 4 out of 6 of them. So then it's like, okay, well, how do they feel about? And even sometimes there's an idea that goes in, and it's like, that's a good idea, but have you thought about that? Because those are the people we're trying to serve. We don't have all the best ideas. Yeah. And we think something that we think might work doesn't necessarily always work.
And how do you structure that? Is it a group chat? Is it calls?
It's a group chat, yeah. So we'll do it on Zoom or in person. So predominantly we meet every quarter. So again, we set it up about 6 months ago. So we're going to go in. We've now just done the next one, or in the process of doing the next one. Sorry, and that will be in person. So 2 in person, 2 on Zoom, if we can get everyone together.
And to give, you might not want to disclose this, but to give other business owners the insight. What's the agreement there? Like, are you paying them? Are you taking care of them? They
do it because and one thing we always do is constantly look for feedback. So you want to look for net promoters of your business. So these are people that have referred us very frequently, is the first one. And there's no agreement. The agreement is that everything they're doing is going to improve their service for them anyway. And they're very happy with that. One thing that I found is and I'm sure you all agree with this, you've done this, you've been very good to me as well, which is most business owners are very giving with their time.
Yeah.
And they're very happy to sit and talk through and go through it. And where the most of those clients are business owners, they're more than happy to do that.
Yeah, literally, because if you've been in those shoes and you see someone else, that literally, if I ever see someone starting a business, I'm straight, like, just seeing if I can help, if I can intro them, if I can save them a mistake, if I can, whatever. Literally, yesterday, a friend of mine, I can't actually talk about it because he can't disclose it yet, but he was doing a big event. I was there, I was thinking, mate, you've got such an opportunity to just change, just gave him a different perspective on the marketing approach. I was like, mate, you've got to switch it to like this because of this reason, and tried to come up with some ideas. He actually had to go to the event the next day, so I was thinking, fuck, how can you do something last minute? Like, do you know what I mean? And sat there chatting to him for 20, 30 minutes about that, and it's like, yeah, business owners to business owners feel like you need to help each other. Like,
it can be lonely as well, right? Like, I mean, you set this up very much by yourself, right? I have 2 business owners, which is very fortunate because whenever you're unsure about something or you want to talk it through, you have someone to go to. Whereas if you're doing this by yourself, I can imagine it's lonely.
Yeah, obviously I've got my dad as a business partner, but it's in a very different bringing very different things to the table. So he's very much on-site knowledge. So yeah, in terms of the thinking of the company and driving of the company, it's like, yeah, it's extremely lonely. Now it's great once you get a team. Yeah, that's I love it. Like, now I've got good people here around me in the office, super clever, super forward thinking, and it's great to bounce ideas off them and they come to me with ideas, and that's such a nice point to get to in your business. But when you're first starting out,
do everything.
You ain't got that. Yeah.
And this is one of the things that we're talking about changing within. So historically within the financial planning profession, I always talk a bit like this pyramid. Yeah. So at the top you've got a small number of advisors. You've got a small number of advisors. And then underneath that, you've got what we call technical analysts, paraplanners, so the people that aren't advisors yet or maybe don't want to be advisors, but they're really technical people in our team. And then you've got administrators who basically process paperwork, book meetings and stuff. With some of the stuff that we're implementing with AI and processes and automating workflows and so forth, we think it's going to shift. So it's going to become like a reverse pyramid where you've got more advisors. Yeah. You've got more technical, or probably the same amount of technical analysts. And then you've got a smaller number of admin, and they're probably not admin, they're probably just people that are making sure the tech runs, the workflows run. Now that's beneficial for us as a business because we're going to want to try and attract younger people into the profession. Younger people don't really want to get into the financial planning profession to do the mundane tasks that we tell them to do. What they want to be in is client meetings. Yeah. How do you actually build plans? How do you actually invest money for clients? And by reducing that level of friction, we can move them in slightly earlier. Doesn't mean they're going to be there advising clients, but they're going to see far more day-to-day of what we do and how we help clients.
It's actually really interesting you say that. Just today, I said to you off camera, I've had a proposal through for we're implementing AI agents and stuff like that to do a lot of tasks for us. And I literally leant back in my chair earlier. I said, do you know the thing I like about it is, weirdly, what I'm actually seeing for us is we're going to get so much more of the face-to-face, people-to-people. So AI is actually going to bring us, in my view, if we utilize AI in the right way, then AI is going to give us an opportunity to spend more time face-to-face, do more of the people-to-people thing. And so it's really interesting you just said that, because I saw the same thing. I thought, if we don't need to do all the admin stuff behind the screen, we don't have to write out take ages to write out some super long email. Instead, we can call the AI agent that will transfer it into this thing and ping it off. And same for the client as well. So it reduces the stress there on the client, and we can just spend so much more time face to face.
And everything's more efficient.
And everything runs smooth and consistent, and certain things are just taken care of. No one's off sick, none of that stuff. It's not being missed. It's all been documented. There's an optimistic view that AI will bring us all closer together.
I think so, in a weird way. And I also think that for what we do, people always talk about, if people can automate advice, are they going to give it? Most people don't want to take advice currently, in its current format, don't want to take advice from... It's why robo-advice never took off and why it continues not to take off. Because there does come a certain level of point where people go, I'm just not sure. To the point around business and running ideas past each other, people want a consultation. They want to have a chat. They want to understand if they're doing the right thing. They want to understand if they're missing opportunities that are available to them or if they need to think smarter about things. So for us, I think it's going to be able to us to reduce cost, which then allows us to take on more clients, allows us to spend more time with those people, and allows us to produce a better service.
Yeah, there's there's a lot of scariness around AI, but I think there's a lot of positive, hopefully, and it's in the hands of entrepreneurs and business owners, like lots of things, like the economy. But I think AI and the future of AI is in the hands of business owners and entrepreneurs, and I think from small company owners right up to obviously the biggest company owners, it's their responsibility to work with it in the correct way and use it in the best possible way, because we can all gain from it, we can all get an advantage from it. Don't push that boundary. You know, there is going to be some people out there that will try to push that and take it too far, but actually I think we have a responsibility to utilize it to make our lives easier, our staff's lives easier, our clients' lives easier, bring more face-to-face action into play, but don't try and use it to get one up in a bad way.
Me and my business partner Rob, we spoke at there's a accredited body that we're part of, that we have to be a part of as a financial advisor, Personal Finance Society, where they do an annual conference. Myself and Rob spoke at that conference, probably to about 500 people, about this concept of AI, all right? And when I say that we're in a very traditional industry, and we were standing up talking in front of AI, it wasn't like we found water, it was just like this stuff had blown their mind. And one of the things that is true is once you get up to date with AI, it's moved probably again. Yeah. But when we were doing this talk with them, it's all around, like you say, automation of workflows, marketing side of stuff, coming up with, okay, what marketing strategy, how are you going to write word and copy and stuff like that. Meeting notes, all this stuff that's applicable to what we do. And I had a guy come up to me at the end and he said, I'm a bit nervous about AI, and you know, what if you say something to a client that you're not supposed to say and it's written down? And we're just like, just be better, just don't say stuff that you're not supposed to say. There is the flip side, especially in the finance space, where there is quite a lot of, obviously finance is very emotive, it's very important, it's just how people's life works. You have to be mindful of the generative AI when you see like, you've seen like Synthesia, where it's like the ability to replicate yourself. And like people have used that for, like Martin Lewis was promoting Tesla as a stock and stuff like that. So it's like, how do you then put parameters in place? And as a business, you probably need to have an AI policy about how AI should be used in the business and how it's not to be used and so forth. So it's interesting, but you do have to be mindful. Yeah,
it's early stages, isn't it? It's about using it just for the reversible things as well. So I think we spoke about this with the person that's going to help us build our AI, and it's about, we need things in place at the bottom of everything that's of the transcript that's passed over is, this is sort of for documenting purposes. This is not the kind of final sign off. This cannot sort of stand on either side of the party. It's for easy communication, but anything that's important or irreversible needs to be done in a traditional way for now, until we know that absolutely AI does not go wrong. For now, you need to kind of be smart in how you use it, but I still think it's not a reason to not use it. I think getting your foot in the door with it and starting it off in your business in an easy way, and then letting it progress and riding it out as AI progresses very quickly. I'd rather have it in my business right now than not have it in my business. And I've decided we need to pull the trigger and we need to get it. So, and I've been thinking about it for the last 6, 7, 8 months, but it's just building something that actually commercially does benefit us in the business.
Yeah, for sure.
7 months ago, I saw it, I was like, wow. I was like, that's great, that's cool, and then it came to it and I was like, it's not actually really going to solve any problem within my business. Now there is certain AI stuff, systems and processes that can be implemented to commercially benefit us. So like I say, we're going to pull the trigger hopefully within the next 8 to 10 weeks. It's going to be coming into the business, which will be cool.
Exciting.
It's exciting. Wow, I'm going to have my first AI agent like working for me at all times. Just call them up, hey, can you do this for me?
It's got to be better. I mean, like a lot of we can use it now for like the mundane tasks, like they're phoning providers to get information for clients. Like that used to be someone sitting on the phone for like 40 minutes to an hour, just sitting there on hold, waiting for it. Then when you get through to someone, we had someone once who was on the other end who was asleep.
No way.
So if they can get rid of that stuff and we can get rid of it, everything's just going to be slightly better.
Yeah, no, I agree. So what's your plans then? You're in the space of planning and future planning. What's the next 5, 10 years look like for you and someone in your position, a business owner, a newly formed business? Obviously does well for yourself. So what's your sort of plan? What's your strategy?
Our plan is to continue to grow.
The business.
Grow the business, yeah. And we're going to do that primarily from taking younger people through the process. We were very fortunate, myself, Rob and Rob, we were given opportunities, which is rare in what we do. So we feel like we want to give back on that front. And I mentioned earlier about the stats of how many advisors are going to potentially be retiring. I think it's twofold. Probably organic is going to be the one where we just acquire clients via word of mouth, referrals, content marketing, and so forth. Then the second side is potentially partnering with a retiring IFA that wants to find a good home for their clients and therefore pass us that way. We're going to continue to obviously implement AI in the business to streamline stuff, to give people more interactions with clients. We're going to set up an actual formal, where I mentioned we're taking people through, we're going to set up a formal sort of apprenticeship academy style where we're going to do all the training for people coming through. So it's growth, all in all it's growth.
Nice.
And acquisition side of stuff.
And your personal investments?
Continue to, at the moment my money's going into my business, so going back to the thing we said at the start. So personal wise, I'm just going to continue as we've always done, like I said, stocks and shares, index tracking.
That's what you stick to.
That's what we stick to. So
actually, before we wrap it up, two things that we've not touched on. One, crypto. Let's talk that quickly.
Let's talk crypto.
And then something you've not mentioned is the pensions.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap it up after that. So crypto.
What's my view on crypto?
Yeah.
It's an interesting. There's some stuff we can and cannot say about crypto. I think if we're focusing on, I think crypto's become pretty prominent, and that lends to my 90-10 rule personally.
Which side's crypto?
I think it should form the 10 for now. And there's two parts. That one, I think if you're looking at the argument people have always had in our space is it's got no track record, right? You could argue Bitcoin's been around for what we would deem a fairly long time within our profession now to say, okay, is there a track record? Do I think it's an actual asset class? I think the jury's still out on that. I don't necessarily think it produces income. It's very volatile. You can't physically see it. Not that you could, if I was to say to you, right, so for example, we speak about something, people always go, well, I don't want to invest in stocks and shares because I like property, right? And why do you like property? Well, I can feel it, I can see it. If the same principle applies for stocks and shares, right? You should walk into an Apple store. Every single time someone buys an Apple product, that increases your stock price. So you own a piece of that building in itself, right? So it's slightly reframing how you view those things.
Yeah.
But crypto in itself, I'd put it in the 10% pile. And I think if you're going to do it, do not buy any of these shit coins. Right? Track record wise, do your research, look at the ones that have an established long record, but do not form the main part of what you're doing. And equally, if you're investing in index trackers, you're by proxy going to be investing in firms that are doing AI, right? Microsoft being the most obvious one. Tesla is doing AI. So those businesses by proxy are holding some level of exposure to crypto.
So when does crypto, if it continues, when does that swap? When does that opinion change? When is it, okay, this is a good asset to hold?
I think stability, first of all. I think
the volatility.
The volatility of it, yeah. And I think once it becomes, probably more to the point, once it becomes used in everyday life.
And regulated.
And regulated is a big one as well.
Yeah, I think for me, again, there is index funds for crypto.
Yeah, agreed. They become bigger.
I think crypto as a whole, for me, in my opinion, is, I can't say dead cert, but it is here to stay.
Something's coming, yeah.
But if you're going to get involved with individual picks again, then yeah, okay, it's still high risk. So there is a way to invest in it low risk, but then once you're in the space, you kind of get the appetite for the high risk, and it's the emotional side that gets you. I wouldn't say it's, if you invest in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some of the other top 5, 6, 7 main ones, and you dollar cost average, in 5 years, you're going to be significantly up, in my opinion. But once you're in the space and you see, but number 20 coin, 10x within 6 months, and you slowly start getting higher and higher risk, and that's where it can
That's
go
recency
wrong.
bias, though. So recency bias is where you look at what's happened in the short term and have ignored all the things that have happened beforehand. That's like one of the main emotional behavioural fun. Recency bias. So you look at you look at the information that's currently available and you ignore the information that came before.
Yeah. And you get
it happens with stocks. Yeah, FOMO.
Yeah,
it happens with
FOMO,
stocks.
Let's go. To the moon. Okay, cool. And then so finally, pensions.
Yeah.
So most things we have good conversations we agree about. We did say we're not going to touch on. We have good conversations around trust funds, group structures, so on. Obviously, this is stuff that you're clued up on, but we won't talk about it on this episode. Obviously, if anyone has interest in that, reach out to you directly. But let's talk pensions because you love them. I don't. What's your thoughts? What's your opinions?
There is no better wealth accumulating product than a pension. Right? The reason for that is, so actually there's two parts to this, right? Because there's two different ways. You've got pensions for business owners and you've got pensions for like employees for us, right?
Yeah.
If I was to say to you, just generally speaking, let's focus on the professionals. There's an investment that as soon as you invest in it, it gives you a 25% uplift on the return. If you're a higher rate taxpayer, you can reclaim another 20% from your tax return, so you get more money back in your pocket. All the growth that you get on the investment within that product is free of tax, no income tax, no capital gains tax. And when you come to draw the money out, 25% of it is tax free. I would probably hasten to, you would go, where do I sign up? But it's when we label this thing with pensions. Pension is just a tax wrapper in itself, regardless of what it's called, right?
Do you think it's because it's associated with the old school financial advisor, where you already said the connotations of those, and now you link pension in the same way that it's just like, It
is, and it's because of the access, right? So one of the limitations of pensions, you can't access it till 57, right? Now, for most people, we're probably not going to stop work until that point. Some people enjoy working, right? And some people aren't. We see this all the time. People phase out work. People don't. This old school mentality of get to 60, 65, stop, take your pension, done for the rest of your life. I think now we're seeing that change, right? Which is one of the reasons we set up the business in the way that we have, because traditionally that is changing. Generations are changing and so forth. For business owners, there is no more effective way of moving the money from the business to your personal name. It gets a reduction in corporation tax for you, so 25%. You can max £60,000 contribution each year into a pension from a business. You can do that personally, but predominantly a lot of people don't have the ability and scope to do that, and it's not necessarily right. But as a business owner, you move money from the business into a pension, £60,000 a year, reduces your corporation tax by £15,000 a year, right? You then free to grow that money. You can invest in property, commercial property potentially. You can invest in passive funds, and you leave it and grow, and you get all the tax benefits like I mentioned before. The one thing that, one of your questions earlier was, how do people start investing, right? If you're someone that's starting out and you're employed, you're already investing, predominantly because you've got a company pension which is invested, right? So you are to some degree already an investor, and you really want to look under the bonnet of that pension that you're in your work scheme. There's probably a whole host of conversation we can have around that, around making sure that that is aligned to your longer term. To your point, if you're younger and you're in that scheme, you should be maximising the risk applicable to that investment that you're in, because you've got 30, 40 years until you can touch it. You need to make sure that you're getting as much return on that money as possible over a longer period of time.
So should you be putting as much as you can into your pension?
I see, this is where you're going to hate me, where I'm going to say it's based off of the personal circumstance, right? As someone who's younger, who probably has more specific goals, they want to purchase a property, maybe a second property, get married and so forth, you should have one eye on that. And it depends on your earning level and all these things, but traditionally or predominantly, you probably should be focusing on it. If you can, sometimes with pension schemes, especially your employer, they have to do 3 and 5%. So you do 5, your employer does 3. Sometimes in the scheme rules, and obviously employers don't promote this, if you increased your contribution slightly, they may match it. So you get free money coming in from your employer. So that's another, it's just free money, right? But you should look under the bonnet of what you're invested in. But no, not necessarily if you're a young person should you just be piling money into that, right? Because you've got specific goals. As a business owner and you've got excess cash, probably something to look at.
But then what if you're entrepreneurial? What if you're like me? What if you
That's
like
the personalisation of it, right?
Excitement? Yeah. For me, I don't have a pension. I don't think I'll ever have a pension. Would I ever? Yeah, I probably will at some point, just in the form of like your commercial property, SAP stuff, which you can buy commercial property when I've got excess cash, in my opinion, as in not a bit of excess cash, but I'm got 10 million, I'm good. Now I'll have it and I can benefit through that because I don't fully need the money right now and so on. But otherwise, I just think being an entrepreneur is making money with money, keeping it going, seeing bigger returns, seeing opportunities come and go, you know, different businesses, whatever it is, you need access to cash. Sometimes businesses will fail, sometimes things go wrong, and you need the business could collapse because you don't have access to all of your money.
And that's why I say it's personalised, right? If you and I were sitting here and we were having this conversation, right, and I say, well, what do you at? This is the way. No conversation with a financial planner like us will start with, well, how much money are you going to put into pensions? Like, well, what are you here for? What are your concerns? What's your ambitions? Where are you heading? What do you want to do? And from our conversations, we would have picked out the fact that actually, if there is opportunities, I want to have some liquidity left over to be able to go into it. And if you've got certain cash, then we allocate the cash out for that, right? Yeah. And it's like, with the stuff lleft over, you still have to take into account you've got other things that might happen and so forth. But with that excess, you're not the only person that likes paying tax, right? So you're going to want to try and mitigate it in some capacity. And whether it's just having that one eye on the future and go, look, it doesn't need to be massive lump sums either, right? To your point earlier, £200 a month just goes in from the business.
What about though, like if instead you buy rental properties, something that over time, you know, has shown very good, you know, over time returns.
I've got great stats on this, Joe, right? So there's a great stat, right? So think about the pension as the wrapper, right? What you're invested in is the same as what you'd be invested in potentially if you're in an ISA or you're in any other account, right? I'll send this to you after so you can see it. You can leave it for people to see. They're investing in stocks and shares across the globally diversified has outperformed property, specifically UK property, tenfold. And I'll send this to you as well. In terms of returns.
Say that again.
The return on property versus the return on investing in stocks and shares, great companies of the world, globally, has massively outperformed property in the UK, and I can send you that stat.
Pensions, do you mean?
So pensions are just the wrapper, right? The investments underneath is what you invest in within the pension, right? You can still actively trade within a pension. The pension is just the wrapper, same as the stocks and shares. What sits underneath is what you're invested in. So you can still have a passive investment fund within your pension. And I'm saying that in itself has returned well above property. I'll send you it so you can see it.
Okay.
But I still think that there's benefits to having multiple asset classes, right? Yeah. I'm not saying go all in on pensions, right? Because it's not right for everyone in every situation. Or usually it is right, but maybe not in the right same amounts, right? And if you still want to invest in property and stuff like that, then that's fine. That is what investing is. Investing is, going back to my point at the start, finding assets and building assets and accumulating assets.
And diversifying. So there we are. I do agree anyway. We only have this conversation around me specifically, but for most 95% of people, I think, definitely a pension is something you want to consider and to have. But we only have the back and forth, don't we, with me? I'm like, I don't know about that. But no, cool. Well, is there anything else you want to add? Hopefully this has been useful for people watching.
No, like I say, I'm fairly predominant now on LinkedIn and stuff like that, and we're going to be, like I say, moving into Instagram and stuff like that. So if anyone wants to follow us and get some more tips and things like that, where we talk about this stuff every week, every day, then give us a follow.
What is it? I'll put the link under the thing. But what is your socials?
So my social, so it's this week. It's Scott Millar 25 on Instagram, and then LinkedIn is just my name.
Scott Millar.
Yeah.
There we are. Appreciate it, mate. Good chat. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, mate.